Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you tales of triumph, betrayal, and unexpected twists. Today's story is about a woman who lived in the shadows, underestimated by everyone around her. Little did they know, she was secretly the owner of the company they worked for. When betrayal from her own husband and colleagues pushed her to the edge, she took matters into her own hands and turned the tables. This is a story of resilience, power, and the perfect revenge. Stay tuned as we dive into this captivating journey. Subscribe now to start today's story. I never intended to keep it a secret. My inheritance, the majority shares in global ventures, was a burden I didn't know how to carry at first. But as I stepped into the world of high finance, where power, greed, and egos clashed like swords, I soon realized that sometimes silence is a more powerful weapon than the truth. It all started with the small office I took when I joined the company 3 years ago. The building itself was towering, elegant, but cold, much like the world I was about to enter. I'd spent my life in the shadow of my father's legacy, but I never wanted to be the face of the empire. Instead, I wanted to understand it, learn every corner of it from the ground up. So, I chose to work as a financial analyst, quietly blending into the company, away from the spotlight, away from expectations. I wanted to earn my stripes, not walk into a corner office that had already been carved out for me. The first day I sat behind that cluttered desk, surrounded by stacks of financial reports, I couldn't help but feel like a stranger in my own skin. The smell of stale coffee lingered in the air as I flipped through spreadsheets, trying to make sense of everything. No one knew I was the heir to the company. No one knew I was the one who had the power to restructure everything they held dear. Jessica, my supervisor, often stood by my desk, arms crossed, watching me as I worked. There was always this air of superiority about her, like she could see right through me. And in a way, I let her think I was just another junior analyst, someone who would spend their days toiling away at numbers, pretending not to see the cracks in the foundation of the company. One day, while I was hastily finishing my lunch at my desk, trying to hide the fact that my stomach had been growling for hours, Jessica walked by. She didn't hide her disdain. She glanced at me, then at the leftover crumbs on my desk, and let out a loud, almost sarcastic chuckle. "Are you sure it has nothing to do with the fact that you can't afford the restaurants where we executives have lunch?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension. It was a jab, a calculated insult that she thought would get under my skin. I glanced up, brushing a stray crumb off my simple, modest dress, purchased for a mere $30 at a thrift store. It was a piece that I had held onto for years, a reminder of where I had come from. Jessica's words were designed to mock my humble beginnings, and for a moment, I felt the old sting of insecurity rise in me. But I didn't let it show. I just gave her a faint smile, brushing off her insult like it was nothing more than a gust of wind. If only she knew who I really was. You see, what Jessica didn't realize was that I owned 60% of Global Ventures. I had inherited it all from my father, the founder of the company. And even though I could have stepped into a powerful role, taking my place at the top of the hierarchy, I didn't want to. I didn't want to sit behind a desk with a title that would define me. I wanted to understand the inner workings of the company, to see the pulse of it with my own eyes, not through a glass window. Only 3 people knew my true identity: Meredith, my attorney, Henry, my accountant, and Simon, my brother. Not even Thomas, my husband and the CEO, had the faintest idea. I had married him for a reason. But it wasn't out of love. At least, not in the way he thought. He had been drawn to my so-called simplicity and dedication. He saw me as a hard-working, unassuming woman who blended into the background, someone who wouldn't pose a threat to his power. What he didn't know was that I had been silently evaluating him from the very start. I watched his every move, scrutinized his decisions as CEO, all while wearing the mask of a devoted wife. I kept my emotions hidden, buried beneath the facade of a marriage that was anything but what it seemed. Despite my quiet approach, I couldn't escape the tension that simmered beneath the surface. Jessica would occasionally make snide remarks, little jabs that chipped away at my patience. She had no idea how close she was to the truth. How her smugness would one day be her downfall. But I had to bide my time. I had to play my part. Stay in the background. And wait for the right moment. And then came the day that changed everything. The day Jessica demanded the Richardson Project analysis on her desk. It was a project I had created. It was my initiative to restructure the company. To streamline operations and eliminate unnecessary waste. It was supposed to be my legacy. But little did Jessica know. I had already begun to lay the groundwork to remove the people who stood in my way. "Can you get it to me today?" she asked. Her voice cold and demanding. I frowned, confusion bubbling inside me. "But the report isn't due until next week." "Now," she snapped, her eyes daring me to resist. I could feel the pressure rising within me. But I suppressed it. There was no point in arguing. I simply nodded and got to work, knowing that my time would come soon enough. As I sat at my desk, typing away, trying to meet her impossible deadline, I received a message from Meredith. The board was pushing for an emergency meeting. They wanted to discuss the Richardson project. Should we proceed? For the first time in days, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had waited for this moment. And now it was finally here. The next few hours passed in a blur of calculations, reports, and the hum of the office. But my thoughts kept drifting back to Meredith's message. The board was pushing for an emergency meeting. And they wanted to discuss the Richardson project. This was the turning point I had been waiting for. Everything was about to change. I worked through the evening, piecing together the analysis for Jessica. Every keystroke, every number felt like a reflection of my deeper frustrations. The frustrations I'd buried for far too long. The way the company was being mismanaged. The unnecessary luxuries Thomas was indulging in with company funds. The careless decisions being made at the top. It was all coming to a head. And then, just as the sun was setting, I saw him. Thomas, my husband, strode across the office floor. His usual confidence radiating from him. He was the epitome of arrogance. A man who believed that power and success were handed to him because of his title. Not earned by merit. He didn't even glance my way as he walked past me, focusing entirely on Jessica, who had appeared from nowhere, practically running to catch up with him. I felt a wave of anger wash over me, but I held it in check, pretending to be busy with my report. I had never been one to show my emotions, not even when Thomas ignored me, or when I watched him act with complete disregard for the very values my father had instilled in me. The truth was, I had been observing him for years, and it was clear that the man I had married was not the man I had hoped he would be. As CEO, Thomas had failed to live up to expectations, and I had known this long before the board started questioning him. I'd been gathering evidence, quietly collecting the pieces that would eventually expose him for who he truly was. Hours later, Jessica returned to my desk, her energy practically bouncing off the walls. She was giddy with excitement, clearly having just returned from a private meeting with Thomas. She looked at me, a malicious glint in her eye, before declaring, "Mia Thompson, gather your things, you're fired." I froze, the words landing like a physical blow. "Excuse me?" I asked, unable to mask the disbelief in my voice. "We've discovered discrepancies in your reports." Jessica sneered, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You've been leaking confidential information about the Richardson project." I stood up slowly, the room suddenly feeling small, suffocating. "That's ridiculous," I countered, trying to maintain control, but my voice trembled with the weight of the situation. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I created the Richardson project." Jessica's smile widened, and she called security to escort me out. My heart raced as I looked over at Thomas, who had remained silent through it all. His face wore a look of feigned concern, a carefully crafted mask that only made my anger burn hotter. "Sophia, sweetheart," he said, his voice full of mock sympathy. "I can't believe you would do this. You're fired." I couldn't believe it. The man who had promised to stand by me, the man I had sacrificed so much for, was the one to end my career without a second thought. But then again, he didn't know that my career wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As I was led to the lobby by security, I could hear Jessica's voice, sweet as honey, addressing Thomas. "Now that you're divorcing her, how about dinner? We can discuss my promotion. The words stung more than I cared to admit. But they also fueled my resolve. I would show them all what it meant to underestimate me. In the parking lot, I sat in my car, staring at the dashboard, trying to process everything that had just happened. My phone buzzed again, and I glanced at the message from Meredith. Do you want me to reveal your identity now? I thought for a moment. Then typed back. Not yet. Wait 2 more weeks. I want to see what else they plan to do. A sense of determination flooded through me. I had been patient for so long. But now, I had a plan. The Richardson Project was my creation. My vision for the future of global ventures. And no one, not Thomas, not Jessica, was going to take it from me. The best revenge, I knew, would come not from anger, but from waiting for the perfect moment to strike. For the next 2 weeks, I stayed in the shadows, watching as Thomas and Jessica dismantled the very foundation of my work. I could see the company's decline unfolding right before my eyes, and it made my blood boil. They were destroying everything I had worked for, all in the name of greed and power. But I wouldn't let them get away with it. I wouldn't let them burn down my legacy. During those weeks, I received more messages from Meredith, each one detailing new discrepancies and fraudulent activities within the company. Embezzled funds, fabricated documents. It was all starting to come together. My resolve only grew stronger. I wasn't just going to take back my company. I was going to take back my life. And when the time came, Thomas and Jessica would have nowhere to hide. The moment had arrived. I could feel it in the air, the tension, thick and undeniable. After 2 weeks of silent observation, watching as Thomas and Jessica wreaked havoc on everything I had built. The time for patience was over. It was time to take control. I had prepared for this day, planned every detail, and I was ready. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and as I walked through the lobby of Global Ventures headquarters, the receptionist, who had witnessed my humiliating exit 2 weeks earlier, looked up at me in disbelief. I could see the recognition in her eyes, followed by shock. Miss Thompson, you can't be here, she stammered, her voice full of panic. I smiled, calm and composed. Actually, I can. Please check with security. I have a meeting with the board of directors in the conference room. I walked past her, the click of my heels echoing through the vast, polished floors of the lobby. As I made my way through the building, I couldn't help but notice the strange looks people gave me. Some were puzzled, others filled with admiration, but none of them knew the truth. None of them knew who I truly was, or how much control I had over this company. When I entered the conference room, I found Thomas and Jessica already seated, looking uneasy. Thomas, as usual, was trying to project an air of confidence, but his fidgeting hands betrayed him. Jessica sat next to him, her smug expression failing to mask the unease in her eyes. They didn't know it yet, but their world was about to come crashing down. I stood tall at the entrance, and for a moment, I allowed the silence to stretch between us. The board members looked at me with varying degrees of surprise and confusion. I could see their discomfort as they exchanged glances, wondering what I was doing here. But I knew I had them right where I wanted them. What is she doing here? Jessica's voice cut through the stillness, her tone sharp with indignation. Her face was twisted with frustration. Sit down, Jessica, I said calmly, my voice unwavering. This concerns you directly. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she hesitated. She clearly didn't know how to respond. She turned to Thomas, who seemed just as confused. But before he could say anything, the door opened, and Meredith walked in, pushing a cart stacked with thick folders. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. Meredith was a force to be reckoned with. Her presence commanded attention, and she didn't even need to say a word to make everyone realize that something was about to unfold, something big. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, Meredith began, her voice smooth and confident. Allow me to introduce Mia Thompson, majority shareholder of Global Ventures and the legitimate chairwoman of the board. The room fell silent. Shock rippled through the faces around the table. Thomas's face drained of color, and I could see Jessica's smirk falter, her bravado crumbling in an instant. This is ridiculous, Jessica scoffed, trying to maintain some semblance of control. She's a junior analyst. A thief. Meredith, unshaken, corrected her smoothly. No, Jessica. Mia Thompson is the daughter of Richard Thompson, the founder of this company. And for the past 3 years, she has been evaluating the performance of this administration. Thomas sat frozen, his face as pale as a sheet. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He turned to me, his voice faltering as he tried to salvage the situation. Mia, I don't understand, he stammered. We're married, how could you? Thomas, I interrupted, my voice steady. I married you to see if you were the leader this company needed. Unfortunately, you failed. The words hit him hard. And for a moment, I could see the flicker of realization in his eyes. The truth was finally dawning on him. Jessica stood up, her hands shaking as she tried to maintain some sense of composure. You're lying. Mia, don't listen to her. Thomas. But I didn't look at Jessica. I focused on the board members, who were now completely captivated by the unfolding drama. The board has the choice, I said, my voice clear and strong. Would you like to review the evidence of the embezzlement first? Or should we start with the forged documents that were used to justify my termination? I clicked open my laptop, displaying the evidence in full view of everyone in the room. The numbers didn't lie. There were millions of dollars missing, hidden in offshore accounts. There were fake consulting fees, ghost payments to shell companies. The paper trail was undeniable. Jessica's face twisted in panic, and I could see her scrambling to gather her belongings, her mind racing to find an escape. I didn't wait for her. Instead, I turned to the board. As of this moment, Thomas Bryant and Jessica Anderson are officially terminated from their positions. Security will escort them out of the building. The room was still, the weight of my words settling on everyone present. Thomas looked at me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and desperation. Please, Mia, we can fix this. We're husband and wife, he pleaded. Surely, you can reconsider. I sighed, the weight of everything crashing down on me. No, Thomas, you couldn't defend me when I was falsely accused. You couldn't keep your hands off the company's money. Or stay faithful. It's too late. As security escorted Thomas and Jessica out of the room, I turned to the board, my eyes filled with determination. This was just the beginning. My plan had worked. And now, Global Ventures was about to undergo the transformation it so desperately needed. The company was mine to rebuild, and I would make sure it thrived once more. Months passed, and the transformation within Global Ventures was nothing short of remarkable. With Thomas and Jessica out of the picture, I took the reins and set about restoring the company to its rightful path. The restructuring plan I had initiated, the Richardson Project, was fully implemented. And its impact was immediate. Efficiency skyrocketed by 70%, and the company's financial health improved dramatically. It was as if the entire organization had been given a second chance at life. I surrounded myself with talented individuals who shared my vision for innovation and growth. And slowly, the toxic culture that had plagued the company under Thomas's leadership began to fade. Employees who once whispered in fear now spoke confidently, their ideas flowing freely in an environment that valued creativity and collaboration. The air felt lighter, filled with a sense of purpose that had been absent for far too long. As for me, I had found my place in the executive suite, not by title, but through the genuine respect and admiration of my colleagues. I no longer had to hide in the shadows. I was a leader, not just by inheritance, but by choice. The journey had taught me invaluable lessons about power, resilience, and the importance of staying true to oneself. I often reflect on the 2010 Honda Civic that still sits in my driveway, a symbol of where I came from. And a reminder that success is not measured by flashy cars or lofty titles. It's about the impact we have, the choices we make, and the people we become along the way. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring life stories.